But we get into some good conversation with my brother Daniel Yang. I want to let you know on the front end here, he is someone who has been a huge blessing to the Unshackled Network. If you've kind of rocked with us for a little while, you might have heard that we were a part of an exponential event, I don't know, a year plus ago, where we got a grant because of the work that we're doing with micro churches. He actually proposed that we be presented or be one of those presenting in that. He got me to meet one of my ministry mentors in the microchurch world, and he was gracious enough to give us time for an interview today. And he's also been the recent co-author. It's him and two other brothers, Eric Costanza and Matt Sorens. They wrote this book called Inalienable, which you can find on Amazon. But it is a powerful book all about how the evangelical church has, over the years, ignored the voices of those on the margins. And how now, if we were to actually look to and maybe even center the marginalized, that actually is going to be the rescue that the American church desperately needs. We don't get into the book as much as I wish we did. We don't get into his ministry, the Prodigal Network, as much as I wish we did. But we'll give you some thoughts on where you can go to find that and a little bit more about that later. But we're gonna get to the first segment here as we jump into the main event. So one of the first questions that I ask him is one of the questions that I ask everybody. It's about their story of coming to know the Lord and their salvation. So let's hear him tell his freedom story.
It was my opportunity to make good with that. And then eventually, bought a house in the suburbs and bought my dream car, which was a Yukon XL at the time, and at the age of 24, I was very involved in my church at the time as well. I was at that point serving as a worship leader in our church, very close to my pastor. And I started having struggles and doubts in my faith. Questions that I probably had in college, but for whatever reason, they just didn't hit the way that they did at this point in my life. And questions that aren't very uncommon. I mean, they were common, like the question of evil, the problem of suffering. What about those who have never heard of the name of Jesus? And these things began to kind of bother me. And I began actually asking questions about the validity of the Bible and the existence of God eventually. And when I even went and told my pastor, I'm like, I feel like I'm losing a grip on my faith. And he was like, just keep doing what you're doing and be honest. And this probably went on for about almost 2 years. And it was Easter of 2004. So I was still a software developer, and I would say I'd probably spent like a couple hours each day listening to like debates and studying apologetics. And then I stumbled upon a webpage that was curating N.T. Wright's work. I didn't know who N.T. Wright is, and I don't know if your listeners know who N.T. Wright is as I'm telling the story, but he's one of the leading New Testament professors in the world. Yeah. At the time, he was the Bishop of Durham, which made him the third in line in the church in England. And so, a pretty well-respected scholar. Yeah. And I had no clue who he was.
At the time, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
You just came across it.
he just happened to be writing a lot about the historicity of Jesus. And so I shot him an email. It was the week of Easter, and I had tons of questions, and a lot of them were around the questions that I talked about, and then a lot of them were around a few individuals that used to be, incredible, well-known ministers and preachers that eventually, gave up their faith. And so I just dropped this bomb on him, and surprisingly, he responded, and wow. he didn't give me a long answer. He gave me about a paragraph. He said that, my questions were too big to answer in an email.
Right.
And he said, but you have to ask yourself, either the resurrection happened and it must mean something, or it didn't happen. That's the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
Or it didn't happen, and you can be on your way. This is a very British response.
I love the simplicity of it, though, right?
Yeah. And again, he didn't answer any of my questions, but what he did for me was he gave me like a peg to kind of just hang some of my questions on. And out of that season, I said to myself, hey, if I'm going to be a Christian, then I'm going to study the Bible. And I'm going to really just try to understand what the message of the Bible is. And so I wish I would have knew that there was a cheaper route at the time. But so what I decided to do is, at the age of 26, as an engineer, I just said, hey, man, I'm just going to pay my way through seminary. And I enrolled in seminary not necessarily to become a pastor or a minister, but it was really to try to just understand and know the Bible more. So probably about a year and a half into it, that's when I started sensing a change in my vocation. Yeah.
So let me make sure I unmute my mic here. As that little intro segment kind of walked us through, he has a very interesting kind of faith story. Now, I didn't give or allude much to it beforehand, but in the interview, and you'll see the full length version of that on the Freedom Story Media YouTube channel later today, and on this channel later next week. But he talks about how he grew up in the faith. Like, he grew up like that was just a part of the way that their life was. And so it wasn't until later, while he was serving in church, like that's one of the things I thought was so interesting. It's like, wow, like you're like leading worship and you're coming to faith, really,
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. Was there anything else in that segment that you were intrigued by or that you were drawn to?
Well, I thought it was important that he mentioned how he had questions, because I think a lot of the time it's like a unspoken thing that we're not supposed to question. But I think, even the disciples questioned, and that's how you learn. If you don't ask questions, you're not going to get the right answer. So
Right.
I think that as long as you keep, heading in that direction in your relationship with the Lord, but to question like, well, why is this? Why is that? I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And it's important too, like who you're bringing those questions to.
Yeah.
Like bring those to Jesus.
Yeah.
Like bring those to God. Bring those to those people that you can trust with the word, like he did with N.T. Wright there.
Yes.
Which is an amazing story. Like, because Reverend N.T. Wright is a big figure in the global church, that he was able to have an early interaction with him there.
Yeah.
And I love that in that. Oh man, my brain just like melted on me. It wasn't the questioning that I was going to. Gosh. Oh, I know what it was. Because it was the response that NT gave him.
Yeah.
That I think was so simple yet powerful, that you can just focus on that one simple truth of Jesus's resurrection. And that is actually really interesting. Like, if you're really trying to simplify it down to a moment, it's not even the birth of Jesus or the existence of Jesus or his death on the cross, but it's the resurrection. That's the piece that like differentiates between the faith and like history books.
That's
and
true.
Like, and like what you're actually doing. Because if he didn't rise from the grave, if he never rose, then is this God? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if he did, then why would you not do everything he says, give everything you can? You know what I mean? Like, so that was, I thought, a really good thing that he was pointing out, that they were having him point on. Yes, unfortunately, we are too often, Tammy, taught not to question. But yeah, that's the only way we can learn anything.
Yeah.
The only way we learn.